So I'm here to introduce our speaker for this workshop. Since joining Toastmaster in 2018, Albert Cormier has served as Area 1 Director and is currently the district's administration manager. Albert holds a Bachelor of Ed in Certificate in Adult Education. His diverse work roles in the past quarter century include science teacher, university and community college instructor, corporate trainer, instructional designer, and website copywriter. He loves using his public speaking, communication, and training skills as a seasoned Toastmaster. Today, Albert will introduce the 4 chemicals produced by our brains that are essential to building resilience and feeling joy, something that is crucial as we endure this ongoing and unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. Some refer to these chemicals as the Lockdown Toolkit. He will also address some basic ways that we can enhance the production of these lockdown lifesavers. One of these that will get special focus is dopamine, the reward happiness neurotransmitter, whose production is associated with working to complete tasks and celebrate success, something every active Toastmaster does. So please join me in welcoming Albert Cormier, a dose of pandemic fighting proportions.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see my screen? It's a blank screen. It's meant to be blank at this point.
We can see it.
Okay. I'd like to start by sharing with you a memory. Yes, I meant it. A memory that's really a meme. It's a meme I saw online in Facebook months after the pandemic started in 2020. Regardless of who we were, our lives were impacted. This virus was in the air. We were all masked. We were socially distancing from one another, working at home remotely if we could. And at the same time, experiencing our own personal crises and traumas and loss of loved ones. A lot of things were happening. There was a lot of volatility in politics as well. At the same time, it was quite an overload. We weren't sure when we were going to see the end, as vaccines hadn't yet been developed. And going through Facebook, I discovered this meme. This meme was actually put together. It was actually rebranded by a company called Sanctus out of the UK. This company actually specializes in being a contractor that provides safe spaces in workplaces for people to address their mental health issues with professionals. In a sense, equipping workplaces with mental health gymnasiums, as it were. And they produced this meme of this lockdown toolkit, essentially introducing the 4 chemicals that we naturally produce that we can actually use as tools and build optimum levels to help us deal with this COVID pandemic. Behind me, you can see there's a dark space, but there's also a light space. And in fact, just like the light that's bouncing off the top of my head, this brought me a ray of hope of things that I could do to deal with this pandemic and stay resilient. So today, what I like to do is these 4 chemicals, I don't know if you've noticed, but they spell D-O-S-E, which means dose. So I thought, well, I just love acrostics, so let's do it. I am calling my presentation a dose of pandemic fighting proportions. In other words, I'd like today to introduce to you these 4 chemicals, their function or purpose, and ways that we can optimally stimulate these chemicals to increase our resiliency. I want to take a different bit of an approach. I'm actually going to show you how Toastmasters, being a Toastmaster, can actually help to stimulate many of these chemicals. It's actually an approach I did some research on, and there isn't a lot of writing about these chemicals and how Toastmasters can help stimulate optimum production. Just to give you a sense, I did a Google search. I put happiness chemicals Toastmasters, and Albert's presentation came out on the first page. I'm thinking, whoa, there isn't a lot. I had to dig and I found some articles. Maureen Zappala, who was a finalist in international speech competition last year, wrote about the joy of Toastmasters. There was another article I wrote about that addressed a bit of the biological basis of Toastmasters, but it's something that I think we really need to discover. And I hope to inspire you today to do some of your own reading and research. So let the dosage begin. You may recognize this person. She's on the cover of our District 45 website, and she is a resilient Toastmaster who takes advantage of these 4 chemicals I'm going to introduce. So chemical 1 is the D. Well, before I do that, let's talk about the Lockdown Toolkit. So the Lockdown Toolkit tools have their own function to help us build a house, but we can use these chemicals to build a house of resilience in ourselves. So this is actually a toolkit I purchased to put things together. And I want to talk about the toolkit we naturally come with and how we can actually stimulate those tools. So here are the 4 members of the Lockdown Toolkit. We start with dopamine, which many call the reward or pleasure chemical. Then O is for oxytocin, the love hormone. Next, we have S, which stands for serotonin, which is our mood stabilizer. And lastly, but not leastly, the endorphins, which we know gets released after exercise, which we call our natural painkiller. So without further ado, let's unlock the kit. First chemical I want to talk about is dopamine. So this is the chemical structure of dopamine, and it is a neurotransmitter in a sense. It's actually involved in neurotransmission between nerve cells, and it also travels in the bloodstream and acts on specific organs. Dopamine is associated with the pleasure that we feel when we focus and give determination toward accomplishing goals or rewards. For instance, if I know that a Krispy Kreme has just opened up in Nova Scotia, of course I know I'm dreaming, and I take the effort to walk to that Krispy Kreme to get that hot off the press Krispy Kreme donut, the dopamine is firing my neurons. I can't wait to bite in and taste that wonderful warm donut, after which the dopamine then sort of disintegrates. But the dopamine is that chemical that drives you toward that goal or reward. Nova Scotia, we don't have Krispy Kreme. Don't know if we ever will, but doesn't mean I can't fire dopamine in other ways. Ways that we can optimally stimulate this chemical as Toastmasters. Of course, here is somebody who is proudly holding their Distinguished Toastmaster Reward. A culmination of many different tasks with that dopamine surge promoting them to attain that DTM. It's important to work toward completing tasks. If you complete a variety of tasks, if it's not something you've already had before and it's something you're wanting to obtain, that dopamine is going to fire. It's going to push you toward obtaining that goal. And of course, we know that our Pathways program provides a number of different levels in the ladder with different varieties of tasks, so we can learn to do everything from composing podcasts to presenting at conferences like I'm doing now, to organizing speech contests, a whole plethora of things that we can learn to do and get that dopamine firing. We also celebrate wins together. And as Toastmasters, when people obtain their level completion or their path completion or their DTM completion, we celebrate the wins. We take pictures. We enjoy. We have cake if we can in person, or we can virtually have it. Another way we engage our dopamine in Toastmasters is if we have an engaging speaker and we're not quite sure where they're going to take us, but we know they're going to take us somewhere, and the suspense that we're feeling as they take us there, the dopamine is just firing and it's enraging. But it's a good enraging, because this dopamine does have a calming effect as we surge toward that goal. Sometimes the dopamine rush is also accompanied by a rush of adrenaline and cortisol, which allow us to focus and keep going. Those are more the stress chemicals. But if those are contained and we've got the dopamine firing, then we can work toward that goal in a state of equilibrium. So the D is for dopamine. It's our reward chemical. But we have 3 others that we're going to talk about. The next one is the O, and O is for oxytocin. That's our love or our cuddle hormone. It is a hormone and a neurotransmitter that's released during sexual activity, during childbirth, during lactation. Oxytocin, here's the chemical structure, is also released in a number of other ways. For instance, oxytocin is released. Oxytocin release will help to build trust and empathy and help reduce our stress levels. So particularly if you are in a Toastmasters meeting, let me backtrack there. By meeting together, and for those of you who attended Tom's presentation, gone to the Cheers bar where everybody knows your name, you're building that social bonding with your fellow Toastmasters. There are other ways you can do that as well. Playing with your pets. My cat is Willow. I throw her a ball with a bell and it sounds like Christmas. I listen to relaxing music. They even make music for cats. It sounds like a cat clawing and a violin, but it's kind of soothing for the cat and it's kind of interesting to listen to. This will stimulate oxytocin production. Another way is to do something nice for somebody or give compliments. When you increase that social bonding, you feel that pleasure and that sensation that oxytocin gives. And I think in Toastmasters, for those who speak about something that's very personal and deep, they put themselves in a vulnerable place. Perhaps they talk about an experience where they lost somebody to cancer. I once did a speech about the death of my wife as a result of an eating disorder. And I remember somebody putting in the chat, thank you for putting yourself in a vulnerable place to share your story and the lessons you've learned. When we listen to other people's stories, we not only learn more about the world, but we also open up. When they share their heart with us, we open up their heart with compassion and they realize that they aren't alone in their struggle. This is oxytocin doing its job of fostering love and trust. So Toastmasters, particularly the speeches and listening to them, really give us that oxytocin boost. Next, we come to of course, here we go. We're going to come to the next chemical. I'm just going to find my timer here. Okay. The next chemical, we've talked about dopamine, which is the reward chemical. We talked about oxytocin, which is the love or cuddle chemical. The next one we're going to talk about, as my voice starts to strain, starts with S as well. It's serotonin. Serotonin is the stabilizer, is the mood stabilizer. In fact, it has a number of different physiological roles in the body. And serotonin, here's the chemical structure, is the chemical that's responsible for controlling mood, attention, sleep, and our experience of pain. People that have too much serotonin, I believe that it's associated with schizophrenia. Too little serotonin can be associated with depression. Obviously, it's a very complicated mechanism. We're still uncovering all the echelons and layers of this onion, but we do know that there are optimal levels of serotonin that allow us to feel in control of our lives and what we're doing. So how do we stimulate optimum levels of serotonin? We can meditate. So a mindfulness practice where we invest time and we meditate. And you can take it a step further, like this gentleman, and meditate with your pets. I call this petitation. This is actually a practice I do, but with my cat, not my dog. And normally, when I start my meditation practice on my cushion, I think the resonance draws the cat near, and eventually I'll feel her curl up and maybe not put a paw on my knee like this gentleman, but I can feel the tail whapping back and forth against my leg. Meditating, particularly with your animals, increases social bond and trust and helps you to obtain that serotonin stabilization. In addition to meditating, of course, exercise. Regular exercise will promote the serotonin burst, and walking in nature and getting exposure to sunlight. This actually induces serotonin production in your skin. If you're out there for 15 to 20 minutes in the sunlight, it makes an incredible difference. If it's winter and it's dark and dreary, exposure to a therapy lamp will also help. Lastly, good food choices. If you want to encourage serotonin production, a lot of it in the gut, if you eat foods that promote good bacterial flora production, such as onions, garlic, apples, citrus fruits, and actually eating tryptophan, sources of tryptophan, which is a precursor of serotonin. And these include things like beef and chicken, but if you're a vegan or vegetarian, get out your hummus. Dip your bread in your hummus, chickpeas, quinoa. These are also excellent sources of tryptophan, sunflower seeds. So serotonin, good diet, exercise, meditation will help to instill those levels. I know we're coming toward the end, but we have one last one, and that is the E of our dose, and that is endorphins. Endorphins are chemicals that are naturally released to relieve pain. They have been thought to evolve to help animals relieve pain if they were under attack and maybe some of their tissue was damaged, to restrain that pain so they could escape from the predator until they were safe, and then basically those receptors would be unlocked and then they would feel the pain. So these are basically chemicals that bind to opioid receptors and inhibit pain transmission. Endorphins, of course, we know that they trigger that euphoric high after you exercise. And this is my form of exercise. I like to step with weights. This, however, is not a picture of me, as you can see, because number one, they both have hair. And number two, I wouldn't be comfortable wearing iridescent green shorts. But aside from that, stepping to some good, and doesn't matter if it's Lady Gaga, if it's Bee Gees, if it's Rolling Stones, baby, I'm on that cloud. I'm not getting off it. I'm exercising and I'm pumping those weights and getting that blood flowing. And in some cases, getting my pet Willow to come over and look at me and say, okay, when is my treat time? So exercise is one way to get those endorphins going. And it doesn't have to be a complicated exercise. It can be a walk out in nature. Any amount of exercise is shown to physiologically have a profound effect. Another thing is eating dark chocolate. This is a bag of dark chocolate covered coffee beans. I don't plan to consume the entire bag, but I will have some of the bag after I'm done this presentation to reward me. So not only am I getting my endorphin rush, I'm getting my dopamine rush, because this is part of my motivation for finishing this. I don't recommend eating a whole bag of these. That is not a take-home message. And lastly, endorphins can be triggered by laughter. So watching something that's funny. I'm a BBC British mystery guy. I've got Acorn TV, I've got BritBox, I've got PBS Mystery. Oh my heavens. Murder mysteries where people are hilarious and they bounce jokes off each other. But I also love to attend fun Toastmaster meetings. You learn a great deal about your fellow people and you have an opportunity to laugh, particularly if you have somebody that has a particularly good sense of humor. Laughter is a good medicine, a good way to trigger those endorphins rather than having to work out for 60 minutes at a time, doing an exercise that leaves you completely in pain at the end. So there are ways, exercise, by the way, is important, but there are other means that you can do that as well. If you are interested in doing further reading, there is a person, and she's done podcasts on the net, called Loretta Bruening. This professor has written a book about these 4 chemicals. Meet Your Happy Chemicals, I think, was released in 2013, and Habits of a Happy Brain in 2018. I listened to some of her podcasts, did some reading, and found that this was a good way to start my learning or exploration to the 4 chemicals. So as I come to the home stretch, my take-home message is Toastmasters is a great way to get your dose of pandemic proportions. And it's something you can promote to potential guests. You can get your dopamine by working toward tasks that you didn't think you could do and getting closer and closer to it. You can feel the rush of oxytocin as people show you the love and support as they clap and listen to your stories. You can feel the serotonin that comes from taking advice you've heard in Toastmasters about diet, exercise, and mindfulness, as we did this morning with Betsy's presentation. And lastly, your endorphins get your laughter going. Do a hearty laugh. It's beautiful in Zoom because you can mute yourself, particularly if you're like me and you also pound the desk with your fist at the same time when you laugh. Then everybody else doesn't necessarily get that audio blast, but you still experience the endorphin effect. So I want to encourage you to do some of your own research. And I really hope that the chemical basis of what makes us physiologically, what makes Toastmasters and something that makes us happy gets explored. Thank you very much for your attention. And what I will do is I will put my email in chat. And if anybody would like me to send them a handout I'm going to do on the presentation, by all means, please just email me. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. And there is my email or Gmail. And now I'll wipe the last bit of sweat off my brow. And thank you all for your attention. How much time do we have left before Crystal brings in her? Oh,
56 seconds.
A time to start, a time to end, a time to break out, a time to break back. Ecclesiastics, according to Albert. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Albert. Enjoyed it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
We're just waiting. Oh, someone is recording.
Albert,
That's good.
Albert,
Albert is recording. How does Albert, can Albert stop his recording?
yes.
Albert can.